week one of the fantasy football season. He is the top 36 running backs. I'm ranking this week number one, Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon, first running back off the board in many fantasy drafts. This week, a great matchup versus a Dallas Cowboy team that he's owned throughout his career, going back with the New York Giants. And like I said, this Cowboy defense, they traded Micah Parsons last week, their best defender, obviously. So I think Saquon has his way in this game, and it wouldn't be surprising if he breaks off 1 or 2 big runs in this one. Number 2, Christian McCaffrey of the 49ers. McCaffrey, he's been healthy all training camp, all preseason. This week, a good matchup at a familiar foe in the division at the Seattle Seahawks. And McCaffrey, we know he could do it all, and he's got potential this season to be the number 1 back overall. That's just how good Christian McCaffrey is. And last season, the injury just held him back. Number 3, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. This week, a decent matchup versus Tampa Bay coming to town. Division matchup. We know Bijan, he could do a little bit of everything in between the tackles, physical back, catch the football out of the backfield. And I think he might get even more work early in the season than we saw last year with obviously the young quarterback, Michael Penix in there. From number 4, Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. Achane, he practiced so far in the early going this week. He's been banged up all training camp with a calf injury, but he's good to go. And this week, a good matchup at Indianapolis, where their defense has given up a lot of points over the last few seasons. So fast track indoors at Indianapolis. And this Dolphin team, they know this season is make or break for this coaching staff and some of these players. So they got to go out there and start putting up numbers and victories. Number 5, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs, what the first 2 seasons it's been for him in the National Football League for Gibbs. This week, a tougher matchup, and that's the only reason he's number 5 is Gibbs. Like, if you wanted to rank these guys a little bit different, it's not far off because these are the top 5, top 6 guys, in my opinion, week in and week out, regardless, and the way they were drafted, just a little bit out of order. Number 6, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucky Irving last season took the backfield by storm, and he never looked back mid-season where Rachaad White couldn't get anything going, and Irving showed he was a 3-down back. And this week, a good matchup at the Atlanta Falcons, where their defense is leaky, and we know this most likely will be a high-scoring game between these two teams. Anyway, number 7, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. So this week, a tough matchup at Buffalo, but I still believe this could be a high-scoring game between these 2 top AFC teams going at it. And Derrick Henry, we know last year, the monster year in his first season, only over 1,900 yards, rushing over 15 touchdowns on the ground. But this week, just a little bit of a tougher matchup at Buffalo. And let's say for some reason they're down. We've seen last season as well. If they're down, he's not in the game much. And that's Justice Hill's spot as the 3rd down passing downs back. Number 8, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase Brown, he's been moving up draft boards over the last few weeks. And this week, a pretty good matchup at division rival, the Cleveland Browns. But I think this game could be tighter than people think. For whatever reason, the Bengals have struggled over the last few seasons versus Brown team. But Chase Brown, 3-down back, no competition over there in the backfield. One of the better receiving backs as well in the league. The only thing you got to worry about him, obviously, is his size. Number 9, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. Taylor, last season, finished strong, but a lot of wear and tear on that body, over 330 touches last season between running the football and catching it out of the backfield. This week, good matchup versus Miami. Their defense has been decimated all the training camp. And Jonathan Taylor, we saw last year, he had some big runs where it would take just one big run for him to have a day. Number 10, Ashton Jeanty of the Vegas Raiders. Maybe I'm low on Jeanty this week than other people, but I think this Patriot team, they're going to focus on trying to stop Jeanty. And Mike Vrabel, we know, is a defensive-minded head coach, so this week it could be a grinded-out game at Gillette versus these two teams. But Jeanty, he's going to be a stud running back, I believe. But this week, some of these players, obviously a little bit higher than him. Number 11, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams, got his contract extension. I know there's been some talk Corum is going to work his way a little bit into getting some of the touches from Kyren. But the last 2 seasons, he's been a workhorse. And I know he's missed some games, especially in 2023. But Kyren, a big part of this offense. And obviously, he got 3-year, $33 million extension. He's not really going to sit on the bench much. Number 12, Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. Jacobs, last year, first solid season in Green Bay. This week, a tough matchup. Detroit coming to town, division matchup as well. But Jacobs, the only thing I knock on him, obviously, is he don't catch the ball enough out of the backfields. If he's not scoring touchdowns or having 100-yard games, sometimes those numbers are down. But this week, Jacobs, like I said, even in a tough matchup, he's one of the more big volume backs in all fantasy football. 13, Alvin Kamara, New Orleans Saints. So Arizona, their defense isn't good. I know the Saint offense isn't good, especially with Spencer Rattler in their quarterback. At least with Derek Carr early in the season last year, they were moving the ball down the field and making plays. And they had Taysom Hill as well, who's a gadget guy, but he's still out for a while with his knee injury. But Kamara, I could see a lot of dump-offs. And with him as well, even at 30 years old, it just takes one big run for him to have a day. 14, James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals staying in the same game. So Conner, he's been a workhorse the last couple seasons for this Cardinal team. I know there's a Trey Benson threat. He could start getting work and eat into the workload as the year goes on for James Conner. But what we've seen from Benson so far in his career, we really haven't seen much. And I think Conner, until he really breaks down, he's still going to get 80% of the touches. And this week in a good matchup in New Orleans, I think it's a solid game for him. 15, Amarian Hampton of the Los Angeles Chargers. So it's going to be the start for Hampton. Najee Harris all preseason training camp. He had a problem with the eye after, obviously, the firework incident. And Hampton, he was going late second, third round in most fantasy drafts. So he's a big physical back. They took him in the first round for a reason. I know it's a tough matchup versus the Chiefs, but I think the volume's going to be there. And to be honest, I don't think he needs a monster workload to get his points. He could be like a Jahmyr Gibbs type, 15, 20 touches a game, and still be an elite back in fantasy football. 16, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. Kenneth Walker, he's been a solid back the last few seasons. I know last year missed some games with injury. People worried Charbonnet's going to step right in and take the job. But this week, it's a tough matchup versus San Francisco. But the volume should be there. And he's a home run hitting ability running back as well. Once he hits that second level, you're not catching him in the open field. But like I said, this week with a tougher matchup with the Niners coming to town in Seattle, Walker, still a decent option, but I'm not expecting a big game. 17, same thing with James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. Very tough matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens, one of the better defensive units in the league. But James Cook last season led the league in rushing touchdowns, solid running back, and even with the tough matchup, he's a fringe RB1, definitely a 2 this week for fantasy owners. 18, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. Last year, nice season for Chuba Hubbard, one of the only bright spots for Carolina. Got a nice contract extension mid-season as well. And this week, a good matchup at Jacksonville. The only thing a little puzzling to me, that they gave him the extension. They signed Rico Dowdle at 1,000 yards last season, was a starter most of the year for Dallas. And also Trevor Etienne they drafted. So a couple puzzling things there, but Chuba Hubbard as of now, he's the starting running back. Pretty decent matchup at Jacksonville. 19, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Breece Hall, people were worried Brandon Allen might eat into Breece Hall's workload, but Breece Hall, he's been a solid back over the last couple seasons. He could do it all as well: catch, pass, protect, physical in between the tackles. This week, though, it's definitely a tough matchup versus one of the best defenses in the league, led by T.J. Watt, led by Hayward, and obviously in that secondary, you got Jalen Ramsey as well. So this week, you temper expectations a little bit for Hall. 20, Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. Monday night division game at the Bears, and we know Jones, going back to his Packer days, dominated the Chicago Bear team. So a lot of people, they're worried that Jordan Mason's going to take carries. I think in the middle of the season, it's definitely a possibility, but Jones signed a new contract in the offseason. He got a pay raise, and they like him over there in Minnesota. And this week at Chicago, like I said, a team he's on throughout his career. He's a solid RB2. 21, Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. I know, very tough matchup in Denver, arguably the best defense in all pro football. But the thing is, Tajay Spears, he's out at least 4 weeks, and I think it's going to be big volume for Tony Pollard. And we know he's been a 3-down back anyway through his career. That 1 year in Dallas when he broke out. Last season, early on when Spears was hurt again, he had some big numbers. Even in the tough matchup with Denver, he could catch the football out of the backfield and be decent for fantasy owners. 22, Trevion Henderson of the New England Patriots. Definitely a guy moving up the draft boards a lot over the last couple weeks before the season has started here. In the next few days is Trevion Henderson. So I think Ramondre Stevenson's still going to get work in this backfield. He's another back that signed an extension last offseason, is Stevenson. But Henderson, he's that explosive playmaker and has the home run ability. We've seen it in the preseason and obviously throughout his college career. So this week with a decent matchup versus the Raiders, I would put him in there as an RB2 for your team. 23, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. DeAndre Swift, every year he's finished in the top 24 in points per game at the running back position. And we'll see how they use him now in this Ben Johnson offense, where we saw Jahmyr Gibbs move all over the field, be a dual threat, catching the football, running in between the tackles. I don't think, obviously, he's got the talent level or the athleticism of a Jahmyr Gibbs, but obviously in this Ben Johnson offense, they'll try to use him in similarities like that. But it's a very tough matchup versus a good defense, but the workload's going to be there. There's no competition for DeAndre Swift. 24, Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Pacheco, he hasn't been the same since he hurt that leg last season, and Kareem Hunt looked like the better back last year, but Pacheco, contract season, working on his route running. And this week in that ball game Friday night, it is a Charger home game, but obviously it's a neutral site with these two teams overseas. I think Pacheco could come out and have a decent performance. 25, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. I think Montgomery's going to lose some work this season. You got to give Gibbs a little bit more in that backfield, but still, David Montgomery, he's a goal line guy. Physical back in between the tackles, could catch, and this is a great 1-2 combo. But this week with a tough matchup, and like I said, with Gibbs possibly getting more touches this season, Montgomery's falling off out of the top 24, 26, Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants. So last season, I thought it was a decent rookie year for Tyrone Tracy. He showed some flashes, some good games, and then he had some problems as well when the fourth quarter a couple times he fumbled in crucial moments. But this week in a matchup at Washington, I think this Giant team, Tracy's going to get majority of the touches early in the season. And then I think we could see Cam Scatterbo get in the mix a little bit as the weeks go on. 27, J.K. Dobbins of the Denver Broncos. I think Dobbins early on in the season, it's going to be his backfield with R.J. Harvey mixed in on passing downs and longs for his team. So this week, not a great matchup versus Tennessee. Believe it or not, their defense is pretty good. But J.K. Dobbins every year now, it seems like he finds a new team. And out of nowhere, he's the starter the first few weeks. And then injuries, unfortunately, do him in. But this week, if you want to use him as a flex option, I think Dobbins, I think he could be all right. 28, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this backfield, it could be a committee with Etienne, Tank Bigsby like it was last season. And now they drafted Bashal Tutin as well in the NFL draft. So this week, it's a decent matchup on paper versus Carolina. But like I said, we got to see how it shakes out in that Jacksonville backfield. 29, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Warren just signed a contract extension, got the 2 years, and I think he's going to be the man, especially early on. I know he's a smaller back and a better receiving back than in between the tackles, but Caleb Johnson, reports have been mixed. Aaron Rodgers doesn't like that he don't pass protect well, but he's a rookie, so I think Jaylen Warren, especially early in the season, is going to be the guy in that backfield. But this week, a tough matchup at the New York Jets. 30, R.J. Harvey of the Denver Broncos. Like I said, I think it's going to be Dobbins' backfield in the early going this season. This week, a decent matchup versus Tennessee, but we know Sean Payton throughout his career. He likes using two backs in his system, and he did it for the longest time, obviously in New Orleans. I think Harvey's going to see the field, but I don't think the ceiling is that high this week. 31, Austin Eckler of the Washington Commanders. I like Eckler a little bit better than Jacory Krosky-Merritt this week here. Eckler, I've said in other videos, he's got a set role, passing downs back, in between the tackles on short yardage he's going to get. And then they're going to mix in Jacory Krosky-Merritt, I believe, and obviously Chris Rodriguez, a name to watch out for as well. So Eckler, at least he's got a defined role, and if you're desperate for a flex or a number 2 running back, if you really passed on running backs in your league, with a decent matchup versus the Giants this week, he has 32, Javonte Williams of the Dallas Cowboys. He's a starting running back. I know Javonte Williams. I know he's still only 25 years old, but it seems like ever since he teared that ACL, he hasn't been the same. And this Cowboy offensive line is pretty good. Obviously, a lot of good playmakers. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Ferguson on the offense as well. But this week, a tough spot at Philadelphia, one of the better defenses in the league, especially going on the road, and especially after they just won the championship. It's going to be tough for Williams to see a lot of daylight, I think, in this one. But he's on this list because he's going to get most of the work in that backfield. 33, Nick Chubb of the Houston Texans. So we'll see what Nick Chubb has left in the tank. He could be a wild card for all we know, and he gets back to form a little bit. But this week, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I think it's going to be a lot of passing by both teams. So Nick Chubb, definitely not 100%, coming off a major knee injury last season where that knee totally shattered in many places. So this week at the Rams, where their defense isn't great, I still don't think Chubb has the burst yet and got his legs back under him 100%. 34, Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like I said earlier, it's a committee over there in Jacksonville. But this week, a good matchup, and I think, to be honest, Bigsby will be short yardage, goal line type of back, and ETN more the elusive finesse receiving back out of the backfield. But like I said, week one, we find answers, obviously, to see how some of these backfields are operating. 35, Caleb Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this week, a tough matchup with the Jets. Like I said, Jaylen Warren, he just signed his contract extension for 2 more years. He's not going anywhere. So in the early going, I think it's going to be Warren's backfield, but Caleb, short yardage, even goal line he might take. And also, these guys are different backs. Warren's a receiving back, and Johnson in college, he's barely made plays catching the football. And the 36 and final back, I'm ranking Jacory Krosky-Merritt of the Washington Commanders. A lot of people big on Merritt coming into the season, especially after seeing the Brian Robinson Jr. deal a few weeks ago to the San Francisco 49ers. But I think Chris Rodriguez could have a say in this backfield. And like I said, if those guys are sharing early downs work, and Austin Eckler is getting the passing downs and the third and long down work, and even some carries as well in between the tackles, I don't think that backfield is that valuable, especially as now. If one of these guys went down on top of it and took over, then this backfield would have more appeal, in my opinion. So that's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking for week one of the fantasy football season.